Attention, duped masses!
You're listening to Media Monarchy with James Evan Pilato.
Eclipsing excitement, critical events, and Kelly's cult. Plus this day in history with Bill Clinton's testimony and our song of the day by Guided by Voices. On your Morning Monarchy for August 17th, 2017, I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. Welcome to wherever you are in the world for fear-free, listener-supported news brought to you by you. Streaming live, MediaMonarchy.com/listen, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 Pacific Time. Share the link with a friend. We are independent, non-commercial, alternative media streaming and online for nearly 12 years. Thursdays are the dark days. We always give the extra warning. Generally speaking, Media Monarchy is for adults, but Thursdays, it's Holy Hexes Day. It's dark, disturbing, occult, chaotic news. It's usually pretty dark. So that's your warning right up top. But a huge thanks to our patrons and supporters, like Chris. No last name given. He's our latest patron on patreon.com/Media Monarchy. Huge thanks to Chris. People like him keep us moving and grooving, going and growing. MediaMonarchy.com/support has the PayPal, the Patreon, the post office box, and some cryptocurrency as well. Also, a huge thanks to the Truth Seeker app and RadioConfluence.com. I did get some emails and some tweets that we were having some technical difficulties. Some people having trouble hitting the stream. Some people having trouble hitting the feed. I haven't gotten under the hood yet to see if there is anything wrong or if it's just user error out there. It's also summer. It's tough. But never hesitate to reach out to me if you think there's a problem. James@MediaMonarchy.com. That's the way to get in touch with me. And a huge thanks again to RadioConfluence.com. Some say the stream sounds even better there. And that's a huge thanks to Jared. And again, thanks to you for being here. So I got a lot of disturbing news to talk about here on your Thursday edition of your Morning Monarchy. Strange things afoot at the Circle K and all around the USSA. They are begging for helter-skelter, begging for race war. The seeds that have been planted or at least watered with the Trayvon events now 5+ years ago are now starting to bear some, could you call it strange fruit? As we glance at the breaking lamestream news, did Confederate symbols gain prominence in the civil rights era? Trump is sad over removal of our beautiful statues. And that's the question now raging in all the fake, phony, divide and conquer, fake left, fake right. They all want to destroy, actually, each other's phony statues. Of course they do. What about that one up in Seattle of Lenin? We were just in Seattle. I missed that. I would have gone to see that statue of Lenin. What about that statue of birthday boy FDR? He's a communist, socialist dictator, locked up 100,000+ people in concentration camps? Tear down that monument. Or what about the monument to that rapist, who we'll actually hear from a little bit later today on This Day in History? We got a jam-packed episode for you. Again, I'll ask you one last time. Share that link, MediaMonarchy.com/listen. Oh, and I forgot about the Albert Pike statue in D.C. We'll see how that guy goes. Candlelight vigil held at University of Virginia, and there is an op-ed. Charlottesville rejects groups provoking race war. But that's not going to get any coverage. That's not going to get any action. No, and even one we might have to talk about tomorrow. Spotify removes white supremacist music after Charlottesville. And this is another situation where no one would have known anything about that crappy music on there. But you're bringing a large amount of attention to it. That's essentially what a lot of the knee-jerk kind of actions are. All right, let's do our fact checks. Reality check, Ireland's border and Brexit from BBC News. Compounded marijuana can help kids with epilepsy, study shows. CBS News has got the fact check on that. Fake news wrongly says Whoopi Goldberg arrested for running a puppy mill. That's from PolitiFact. President Trump's false claim that counter-demonstrators lacked a permit from the Washington Compost. And the musical question from Snopes, is there a class action lawsuit for people who got robocalls from cruise companies? You should also know that today's made-up holiday is Black Cat Appreciation Day. Now, my only question is, do tuxedo cats count? I imagine all the black cat people would say, no, they don't. But I'd like to think that, yes, they do. Hey, maybe our stream isn't actually working correctly over in Discord. Discord, you're kind of being a pain in the ass. And you're acting like jerks like everybody else. You're going to crush speech you don't like. Okay, try again. See if that's working now. Maybe it's just all the technology. Maybe it's just the massive solar flares that have been heading our way. Maybe it's all prep for Super Eclipse-O-Rama. The crush of traffic begins around noon. Tens of thousands of cars steer toward Interstate 5. Motorists in the Salem area are immediately ready to hit the road after witnessing a solar eclipse beginning to end from inside the path of totality. The freeway grinds to a halt. On-ramps back up. Main roads become parking lots. Crashes ensue. Somebody gets injured. Emergency responders have trouble getting by. It stays like this for hours. In a world of worst-case scenarios, this one is one illustration of the type of trouble that could play out in Oregon as an historic eclipse traverses the nation this coming Monday, August 21st. The public officials hope the extraordinary event passes with minimal problem, but it's their job to consider all things considered that could go wrong. That list includes major wildfires, fuel, food shortages, fights or civil unrest, even a disease outbreak. With less than 1 week remaining, state officials say they're as ready as possible for an unprecedented event that is projected to increase Oregon's population by 25%, drawing an estimated 1 million visitors. State officials and Governor Kate Brown's office will discuss prep during a press conference a couple days ago in Salem. We'll try and include that in the show notes. Yeah, of course, lots of drug overdoses will be happening. Officials say their eclipse planning is invaluable, even if the biggest headache turns out to be traffic jams. If there's ever an emergency or disaster, we'll be better prepared because of this, said Corey Grogan, spokesman for Oregon's Office of Emergency Management. The state's emergency management agency has been planning for the eclipse for about a year, coordinating with more than 50 federal, state, local, and tribal agencies. Part of their work included assessing potential dangers facing Oregonians and visitors. Officials compiled a 12-page risk assessment for the eclipse, which the Oregonian obtained through public records request, which is interesting. They're not just sharing that out. The bare-bones review of various problems that could arise is not based on any known risks. At this time, the document says local jurisdictions are responsible for developing their own hazard assessments. So the two biggest concerns they're worried about: wildfires and traffic. State officials say 1 million out-of-state visitors could equal 250,000 additional vehicles, setting the stage for gridlock of epic proportions. If 50,000 of those vehicles are in the Salem area and all attempt to leave immediately after the eclipse, highways would become impassable. In fact, if half those vehicles headed north toward Portland, good God, the bumper-to-bumper backup on I-5 would extend 23 miles across all lanes, said Dave Thompson, spokesman for ODOT, Oregon Department of Transportation. System doesn't have the capacity to handle that. It just wouldn't work. That's why transportation officials are urging motorists to consider the eclipse a 3-day event, not a 3-hour outing. Again, that's 1 million people spending millions of dollars for a 2-minute eclipse. See, it's pretty easy to kind of figure out how we get in the situations we get in here in the States. You guys will dance to anything, like the dead milkman said. State officials haven't offered any estimates about how long commutes will take, saying that unknown traffic and timing creates too many variables. But in the state's risk assessment, congestion is listed as being highly likely. That could lead to injury accidents and significant delays. The duration? Maybe hours, maybe days. Transportation officials are taking steps to help motorists get around. Thompson said the state will place lots and lots of digital reader boards along highways to provide traffic information and updates. Hopefully people hack those and say, "Warning, zombies, run!" Extra maintenance and incident response crews will be staged along highways such as US 26, US 97 in Central Oregon, and I-5 and Interstate 84 in Eastern Oregon. If something happens, they can get there a lot quicker because they're closer. State transportation officials also have implemented traffic plans limiting turns on highways in 2 cities. That's Madras and Lincoln City, where heavy congestion is expected. The state actually recommends you go over to Trip Check. Now, this sounds like they're setting up a scenario that it is a disaster scenario. I've actually got a clip from Dabu that I don't have time for, but I'll include it in the show notes, where he essentially points out they're treating it like it is a mass casualty event, a mass environmental disaster. And it didn't take long. Thankfully, somebody mentioned Night of the Comet in the chat. A lesser-known 80s sci-fi horror film. where everybody watches an event and they all turn to dust, and the only people who survive are the people who weren't looking at the event. It's kind of like Halloween 3 in that way. We often make references to Halloween 3 and Night of the Comet. Hey, and sidebar, 74 days till Halloween, Silver Shamrock. Hey, you're listening to The Morning Monarchy. I'm James Evan Pilato, your host, webmaster, DJ, and so very much more. We've been around for nearly 12 years. And we're talking about the insanity that's coming up right here in Oregon. That's why I call it peak Portland. We have achieved the height. It's pretty much all downhill from here. The other part they're talking about, and the other part they're worried about, are the wildfires. Now, I told you when we were out the last couple of weeks, it added just to the oppressive heat wave that was happening up here in the Pacific Northwest. So not only was it 100, 105, 108, the skies were hazy from massive, massive forest fires going up in British Columbia. So even when we went to Pigathon, it made it pretty nasty. Then we headed up to Seattle. Got even worse. So these are all, again, as is generally smartly noted in the chat, all fantastic distractions for getting their crimes on. So we'll include, of course, everything we say and play. This whole piece from the Oregonian, I'll leave the part out about the wildfires. Eclipse 2017, miles-long traffic jams, wildfires in worst-case scenarios. Oh, and our friends even just note that the air in Seattle was pretty bad. Speaking of our friends, we are not only crowdfunded, but we are crowdsourced. We get our news from you. And our friend Swagger Prance added this one. I thought we already had all the craziness with the eclipse, but Monday's total solar eclipse will provide much-needed, wholesome enjoyment for all of us here in the United States. But to make things even sweeter, NASA, in collaboration with researchers at Montana State University, will be seizing the opportunity to launch some giant balloons during the event. Scientists aren't sending up balloons because they're super stoked about the eclipse, though they probably are. These enormous balloons are part of a project aptly named the Eclipse Ballooning Project and will be used to run several experiments, one of which could help researchers prepare for a trip to Mars. Out of the total fleet of roughly 75 balloons, over 30 of them will carry small samples of an extremely resilient strain of bacteria called something I can't pronounce. Paenobacillus xerothermodurans. Over 80,000 feet above the Earth, the P. xerothermodurans samples will be attached to thin aluminum coupons and attached to the outside of the balloons. According to the researchers, Earth's stratosphere is similar to the surface on Mars, so they'll be able to get some idea of how bacteria might behave there. So they can already get ahead of race-specific bioweapons placed on different planets. We have to be extremely careful that we don't bring bacteria or other tiny Earth organisms to other planets, Project leader Angela Desjardins, Angela of the Garden, director of the Montana Space Grant Consortium, told Gizmodo. While most of these tiny forms of life that exist in abundance around us won't survive the trip through space, it's understood that some resilient types could go dormant on the trip and then survive on the surface of the other planet. That's how that works. And in space, no one can hear you scream. So if you're, of course, watching the eclipse on Monday, don't forget to look up for giant balls of bacteria floating in the sky. So there's another fantastic idea. What could possibly go wrong? Well, these 12 other data points that we're going to add in. The Sleuth Journal has an article from Michael Snyder. I think he runs the Economic Collapse blog. Don't quote me on that. 12 critical events that are going to happen over a 40-day period starting this coming Monday, August 21st, and going all the way to September 30th, which I believe is when the Eagles are supposed to play their final concert ever up in Seattle. See, it all's about the Pacific Northwest. At least that's what we want you to believe. Again, that's why we call it Peak Portland. We're about to witness an extremely unusual convergence of events that many believe could represent a major turning point for our nation. Good Lord, that's how they make the synthesis. They give you the idea, they give you the counter idea, and then they lead you along to where they want you to be. By now, you've probably heard that on August 21st, a total solar eclipse will move across the entire continental United States for the first time in decades. In fact, we've not seen a total solar eclipse cross from the west coast to the east coast in 99 years. And it'll be the very first total solar eclipse that is only visible in this country since the United States first became a nation. Starting with that event, there's going to be a whole lot more that we have until the end of September. 12 critical events. And we begin again with August 21st. The Great American Eclipse will sweep across portions of Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. 7 years later, another very unusual total solar eclipse will move across our nation, and when you plot the paths of both eclipses on a map, they form a giant X right over the center of the United States, which is pretty much where Denver and the New World Order Airport and all that military action is set up. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. Well, America owns the moon. Of course we own the eclipse, too. Then August 23rd, a FEMA exercise known as Earth X 2017. That's Earth EX 2017. Will simulate catastrophes such as mega earthquakes, cyber terrorism, or high-altitude electromagnetic pulse attacks. As someone had already noted in the chat, imagine if an EMP goes off on Monday. Or hell, 2 days after that. An exercise sponsored by FEMA and the U.S. Department of Energy, set to take place on August 23rd, called Earth X 2017, will war game responses to catastrophes such as mega earthquakes, cyber terrorism, or high-altitude electromagnetic pulse attacks. You know, like if you sent up, like balloons or something that had EMPs. The exercise will simulate a subcontinent-scale long-duration power outage with cascading failures of all other infrastructures, according to the official EarthX website, eiscouncil.com/EarthX. Black sky events are defined as catastrophic occurrences caused by man or nature that bring society to its knees. And then September 1st, we got 2 events on that same day. That starts the beginning of FEMA's annual National Preparedness Month for September, and also the U.S. State Department's ban on U.S. citizens traveling into North Korea goes into effect on September 1st. Many are concerned that this is yet another sign that we're moving towards war with North Korea. Then you got 9/11. You got the 16th anniversary of 9/11. Then on September 20th, you've got Rosh Hashanah beginning at sunset. Then on September 21st, it's the United Nations International Day of Peace. So yes, you better rush and hurry up and get your North Korean vacation in. And it's also noted in the chat that people are going to wish they went to Home Depot and got that generator. That is definitely something that my family members on the East Coast have got locked down. September 23rd. So not only is it my lovely wife's birthday, it's also the date of what has become known as the Revelation 12 sign. If you're not familiar with this, and I've only maybe made brief reference to it on the show, and I think I only saw it because it was on the sidebar of something else I was reading, and I was like, oh, wait, that's Cassie's birthday. On September 23rd, a unique astronomical alignment of the Sun, Moon, constellation Virgo, constellation Leo, and planets Jupiter, Mars, Mercury, and Venus is going to fulfill a passage from the book of Revelation. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. So we got that coming up on September 23rd. We might have to talk to our buddy Robert Phoenix about that. September 24th, very important national elections will be held in Germany. Of course, a leading driver in the New World Order engine. September 29th, Yom Kippur begins at sunset and concludes on September 30th. September 30th, of course, being the end of this 40-day period that we're talking about. September 29th also, U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin says that the debt ceiling will be breached on that day if Congress does not raise the debt ceiling by then. And finally, September 30th, as was foreshadowed, if Congress doesn't pass a budget by the end of the day, there will be a government shutdown just like we witnessed in 2013. Oh my gosh, a government shutdown? On top of everything else, the month of September is when the Federal Reserve is scheduled to begin unwinding their $4.5 trillion balance sheet. The other big market force that could ruffle markets is clearly the Fed, which is expected to begin the untested task of unwinding its $4.5 trillion balance sheet in September. In addition, it's interesting to note that a large asteroid will come within 4,200 miles of our planet on October 12th, so now we're beyond that 40-day period. The asteroid has not been seen since its 2012 discovery, when it sped past Earth at about 1/4 the distance from Earth to the Moon. It's been too distant and too faint to be detected over the last 5 years. As it starts to approach Earth this summer, large telescopes will be used to detect it and re-establish the asteroid's precise trajectory. The asteroid, known as 2012 TC4, could come as close as 4,200 miles to Earth, NASA said. That's actually fairly close when you consider that the Moon is about 200,390 miles away. 239,000 miles away. I know math. So this article on Sleuth Journal wraps up by asking, what's it all mean? They don't know. But they're sure they'll receive even more criticism for putting this list together in the first place. Those of us that monitor global events and warn about where things are headed are often highly criticized. But in this day and age, we desperately need independent thinkers that are willing to challenge the system. Way too often, people just go with the herd and will believe whatever the mainstream media tells them to think. And you can't do the opposite and just believe whatever the so-called alternative media tells you what to think. There was maybe a window where that actually would have been true, where you could have pretty much trusted what the alternative media said, because there was a very small amount of it in 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now it's a big, giant mess of people, and it's fairly difficult to know what to source through. It actually takes a lot of time. So one of the other bits that we're hyping for, and our buddy Lauren Coleman's talking about it, and he originally had his post titled Grunge Countdown to August 22nd and August 25th. He's now changed the headline and the title to Death Countdown to August 22nd and 25th. So Lauren Coleman talks about a few different elements. Talks about actually ufology events that go back to 1955 that relate to the Sutton family and alien drawings and the Kelly Little Green Men Days festival that goes on. So we've got the solar eclipse, which is heading into the area, which is, of course, growing a little bit of helter-skelter right now. I don't think we have to worry about that so much in Idaho and Montana, but when we get down to the Carolinas, that might be where the rubber hits the road. Someone's also made a map of the sun squatch. You know, because somebody said there were no more eclipse maps to make, so someone made a map to see the best places that you could see the eclipse and possibly Sasquatch at the same time. After August 21st, Lauren Coleman's concern is for the suicide copycat effect. August 22nd is Lane Staley's birthday. Late great singer of Alice in Chains. Not a suicide as such, but essentially a drug death. So it seems like there might be more grunge copycat carnage after Chris Cornell, after Chester Bennington. And then we've got Lane Staley's birthday on August 22nd. August 25th is Mia Zapata's birthday. She was the lead singer of the Seattle band The Gits, and we've talked about a lot of those things as they involve TV shows, Law and Order, Joan Jett, and the Jesus Christ pose. Again, we'll include those in the show notes so you can run down all the lists. Now, here's the thing I'm kind of wondering about. I might take Monday off to actually go view the eclipse. This pretty much is going to be happening exactly as we're on air, and I couldn't really do the show on air and look out my window and tell you about the eclipse. So we might actually take Monday off to go view the eclipse from the safety of a government building here within Portland that I won't disclose at the moment. But I've got the good glasses, and I think it might be actually a safe, good, tall place to go watch it. Now, I should actually be able to be back in time and maybe still do the daily DJ set at noon on Monday, or, hell, if all hell breaks loose, we might have to just come back and do some live coverage. You are listening to The Morning Monarchy. Right now it is Thursday, August 17th, 2017. I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. Thursdays are the dark days. It's called Holy Hexes, and all the stories you can find using hashtag Holy Hexes. Each day of the week, we focus in on a different area on your morning show. Monday's geopolitics, Tuesday's cyberspace war, Wednesday's food world order, Thursday's Holy Hexes, and Friday is media memes. So that's all the eclipsing, excitement, and critical events. Let's move on to the other areas of dark and disturbing news. A woman who encouraged her suicidal boyfriend to kill himself in dozens of text messages and told him to, quote, get back in, a truck filled with toxic gas, was sentenced last Thursday to 15 months in jail for involuntary manslaughter.
I wrote, not having that one person I've been with every day since birth here and more is a pain that I will always keep with me for the rest of my life. Not having my brother always going to be there for me, and knowing that will always haunt me. Knowing I'll never be an aunt to Conrad's children or get to see him getting married is something I never thought I would have to live with. He gave me an amazing 13 years, being my best friend and the best role model any little sister could ask for.
Michelle Carter exploited my son's weaknesses and used him as a pawn in her own well-being. She has not shown any remorse. The fact that my son was convinced to kill himself makes his death unimaginable. How could Michelle Carter behave so viciously and encourage my son to end his life? Where was her humanity? In what world is this behavior okay and acceptable?
This court must and has considered a balancing between rehabilitation, the promise that that rehabilitation would work, and a punishment for the actions that have occurred. And so I have done so. Ms. Carter, please stand. Ms. Carter, a guilty finding having entered on the indictment charging you with the involuntary manslaughter of Conrad Roy III, now sentences you to 2.5 years in the Bristol County House of Correction. 15 months of said sentence shall be deemed a committed sentence, and the balance thereof shall be suspended until August 1st of 2022. You will be on probation, administrative, until you are released from incarceration, supervised thereafter, and the date of probation commences today.
Michelle Carter, now 20, was convicted in June by a judge who said her final instruction to Conrad Roy III caused his death. Carter was 17 when the 18-year-old Roy was found dead of carbon monoxide poisoning in July 2014. Juvenile court judge Lawrence Moniz gave Carter a 2.5-year jail sentence, but said she had to serve only 15 months of that. He had also sentenced her to 5 years of probation. He granted a defense motion that would keep Carter out of jail until her appeals in Massachusetts courts are exhausted. Carter's lawyer, Joseph Cataldo, had asked the judge to spare his client any jail time and instead give her 5 years probation and require her to receive mental health counseling. He said Carter was struggling with mental health issues of her own, bulimia, anorexia, and depression during the time she urged Roy to kill himself. Miss Carter will have to live with the consequences of this for the rest of her life. This was a horrible circumstance that she completely regrets. Prosecutor Mary Claire Flynn called probation not reasonable punishment for her role in Roy's death. The prosecution sought the maximum sentence of 20 years behind bars. In dozens of text messages, Carter had urged Roy to follow through on his talk of taking his own life. "The time is right and you're ready. Just do it, babe," Carter wrote in a text the day he killed himself. The sensational trial was, of course, closely watched on social media, in part because of the insistent tone of Carter's messages. "You can't think about it. You just have to do it. You said you were going to do it. Like, I don't get why you aren't," Carter wrote in one text. Cataldo argued that Roy was determined to kill himself and nothing Carter did could change that. He said Carter initially tried to talk Roy out of it and urged him to get professional help, but eventually went along with his plan. Cataldo also argued that Carter's words amounted to free speech protected by the First Amendment. That was just noted in the chat. Are words crime now? In convicting Carter, the judge focused his ruling on Carter by telling Roy to get back in after he climbed out of his truck as it was filling with carbon monoxide and told her he was afraid. The judge said those words constituted wanton and reckless conduct under the manslaughter statute. Roy's family told the court Thursday that they were devastated by his death. The worst emotional pain, heartbroken, haunted. Carter and Roy met in Florida in 2012 while both were on vacation with their families. After that, they only met in person a handful of times. Their relationship consisted mainly of texting. Carter was tried as a youthful offender, so the judge had several options for sentencing. He could have committed her to a Department of Youth Services facility until she turns 21. Back on my birthday. Oh, God. I share a birthday with this crazy person. He can also have combined a Department of Youth Services commitment with an adult sentence, or could have given her an adult sentence of anything from probation to the maximum 20-year term. You're listening to the Morning Monarchy, and it's not really going to get better after that. SoftBank's humanoid robot Pepper has taken on various roles since its mass market debut in 2015. You didn't see this change coming, did you? The 1.5-meter tall robot with round white heads have been deployed to banks, sushi shops, and nursing homes. Now, Pepper will don a Buddhist monk's robe. Kanagawa-based Nisei Eco company will offer Pepper, billed as the world's first robot that can read emotions, to chant Buddhist sutras at funerals, providing a cheaper alternative to human priests. The maker of molded plastic products, which has also been in the funeral business since 2000, recently launched a new venture targeting budget-minded customers interested in customizing funeral services. As part of the initiative, Nisei Eco has programmed Pepper to recite sutras from 4 major Japanese Buddhist sects. The firm hopes to charge around 50,000 yen for its services, significantly less than the cash offerings typically made to Buddhist priests. Buddhist priests take cash? Dying in Japan doesn't come cheap. Funeral services can cost millions of yen, and buying burial plots can cost even more. Gross story about burial plots coming up in just a moment. Nisei Eco says using the robots produced by SoftBank subsidiary SoftBank Robotics is part of a larger effort to bring innovation to an industry adapting to changing times. It says the service targets more secular-minded customers looking for alternatives to the traditional rituals associated with death. More broadly, shifting demographics have pushed the funeral industry to experiment with new services. The traditional Danka system, D-A-N-K-A, where parishioners support family temples through donations, is no longer on steady ground in some areas amid accelerated rural depopulation and migrations to big urban death mazes. Changing lifestyles and the rapidly aging population have increased demand for more convenient and cheaper ways to send off loved ones. Our buddy James Corbett has, of course, talked about the demographic winter happening in Japan. Some temples in Tokyo, where burial plots are typically pricey, have built IT-powered facilities that can store thousands of urns. Visitors can retrieve the urns and mount them on altars using touchscreen panels. The Life Ending Industry Expo, that sounds like a blast, where hundreds of funeral-related businesses gather each year to display their latest products and services, allows visitors to try out modern coffins and vote in a competition to choose the most handsome monk. Nisei Eco said its sutra-chanting Pepper will be in the spotlight when the event opens up in Tokyo pretty much now. A Pepper can be purchased for 198,000 yen plus a monthly fee of 24,600 yen. For businesses, it's offered in a monthly rental plan of 55,000 yen. A SoftBank spokesman said that a total of about 10,000 Peppers are currently in use. Pepper the robot to don Buddhist robe for its new funeral services role. And what do you do when you start to run out of all that space? That's why they're putting them in tiny and tinier urns. So let's go from Japan over to New Jersey, if you dare, where mourning gave way to the macabre at a New Jersey cemetery where a beloved grandfather's burial uncovered a moldering bare foot from an adjoining grave. Probably going to be our album art today. I have not seen any other more outrageous photo to make the cover art today, unless you've got some ideas. We are always open to ideas for a cover art. We put different cover art on each day's episode. You got an idea? You're quick at the Photoshop. Actually, huge thanks to our friend, I believe it was Citizens Gateway a couple weeks ago, busted out a brand new Photoshop cover for us that I believe tied in 3 different stories that we talked about on the show, and I believe it was a Holy Hexes episode. Maybe the zombies are already getting ready for the eclipse. The devastated family of Cleveland Butler, he was 85, received a second and unexpected jolt when the body part appeared from the dirt as his blue casket was lowered into the ground at Mount Holiness Memorial Park. This was a very traumatizing situation, first dealing with losing my father, and then this. Daughter Sandra Butler told the Daily News, "I couldn't even look at it. It was too much and no one said anything to us. It was like business as usual for them. They just dumped the dirt in the plot like it was normal, like it's nothing to them." The Butler family patriarch suffered a fatal stroke at a Brooklyn nursing home, and the family assembled last Friday for a brief service at the Robeson and Brown Funeral Home in Bedford-Stuyvesant. That's pretty much the Spike Lee neighborhood, Bed-Stuy. That's where Do the Right Thing takes place. It's actually where my brother went to grad school. Sandra, her brother Alonzo, and other mourners then headed west to the Butler, New Jersey cemetery where their mother and grandparents are buried. Cleveland Butler left behind a large family, including 4 children, 9 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren. After a graveside eulogy and a few prayers, the scene morphed quickly from silence to Stephen King with the appearance of a foot. We all looked down and we were looking at apparently what was a human foot and leg wrapped in plastic, with cloth wrapped around it, sticking out on top of my father's casket, said Alonzo Butler, 53, an MTA bus driver. One of the mourners snapped a cell phone photo of what looks like an outtake from The Walking Dead. Relatives later griped. The cemetery workers ignored the dangling foot and quickly filled in the grave. They heard it was a leg on the casket and they didn't even try to investigate it. The bizarre burial also included one worker accidentally dropping a pack of cigarettes and his cell phone into the open grave. Whoops! The worker, of course, fished both those things out with a rake before relatives saw the foot in the grave. This is beyond heinous for anyone to witness during their time of grieving over a loved one. He called on New Jersey officials and police to investigate this despicable act immediately to uncover who's responsible. Well, I think they know who's responsible. You should maybe talk with the guy who's dropping his smokes and phone into the grave. Good God, this article goes on and on and on. I think you get the idea. Decaying foot horrifies grieving family as they bury grandfather. This is kind of another example of how all of your institutions that used to do good now do bad. And it's not the idea that's the problem. It's not your spirituality that's the problem. It's not you enjoying playing basketball that's the problem. It's the massive, massive multinational institutions built around those things. And they've been exploited, and they've been flipped, and they've been turned. Last few strange stories here on the Holy Hexes edition of Your Morning Monarchy. I actually saw the story from the Associated Press, and I was replying that they had botched their headline. By the time I hit click, they had already deleted the tweet to correct their headline and correct their story. Woman died of shock from naked intruder jumping into her bed. As we go off to Maine, where the state's medical examiner office says a 72-year-old Maine woman, in Maine, that's where Stephen King's from, died from a heart attack after a naked trespasser jumped into bed with her during a home invasion. The Morning Sentinel obtained a medical examiner's report saying Joyce Woods suffered from coronary artery disease and died of shock during the April home invasion. 36-year-old Tara Shibleys was indicted in May on manslaughter, aggravated criminal trespassing, and assault charges. Her trial is tentatively set for December. Efforts to reach Shibbles were unsuccessful. Police say Joyce Woods called 911 early April 2nd after Tara Shibbles climbed into bed with her and refused to let her turn on the light. Woods' family members arrived before police and placed her in a car where she died. Now, the strange part about this story is that originally Associated Press said woman died of shock after naked man jumps into bed, and you read the story, it's like, it's not a naked man. Women can be just as crazy and bloodthirsty as men. What a strange, strange, strange scenario. And I got a couple more strange scenarios for you. Footage of the moment, 13 people were killed by a falling tree during a religious festival on the Portuguese island of Madeira has emerged, and of course the Daily Mail has it for you if you want it. At least 50 were injured, including a baby in a pram, which is the British word for a stroller, when the 200-year-old oak came down over dozens of revelers waiting to buy candles outside a church. 4 of the dead were foreigners, including a German, a Hungarian, and a French national. The incident took place at the Festa di Senhora de Monto, a festival celebrating the island's patron saint in Monte, a village near Madeira's capital, Funchal. Video filmed by a witness shows the crowd enjoying themselves before a large creaking noise can be heard, following by moments of panic as the tree comes down, sending up a shower of dust and debris. And these are those moments that you have to wonder, if there is a God, Why would he crush a dozen of you while you're just trying to celebrate him? Oh, were you doing it wrong? Is it the different God punishing you because you had the wrong guy? You're barking up the wrong tree, so to speak? Not trying to be offensive. We just need to kind of say what needs to be said. Our final story on your Holy Hexes edition, as I like to do, transitions from the end of this day into the next day's coverage. I love basically moving world news into technology news and technology news into food news and food news into weird news. And weird news pretty easily rolls into your media meme stories on Friday. There's been a little back and forth. So let's actually get the back, and then I'll give you the forth.
According to reports by BuzzFeed News on Friday, citing new evidence uncovered by law enforcement, John Eves, chair of the Fulton County, Georgia Commission, made a call for a full criminal investigation into singer R. Kelly over allegations that he is sexually exploiting young women and holding them against their will. The announcement comes as part of a ban against Kelly, hoping to keep the R&B performer from holding a concert in Georgia later this month. According to the statement released by Eves, I am asking District Attorney Paul Howard and his investigative officers and prosecutors to fully review the report of the John Creek Police and follow every lead, no matter where it leads or who it implicates, and bring those persons to swift justice. Kelly has been accused of holding several women, including ones he has reportedly taken under his wings in the hope of advancing their music careers in his Duluth, Georgia guest house, as well as his Chicago recording studio, charges the singer has frequently denied.
So there's the before version. And then the after version. Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard said his office is not currently investigating R. Kelly for allegations the singer held women against their will in a Johns Creek house, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Earlier on Friday, John Eves, chairman of Georgia's Fulton County, called for a criminal investigation of the singer, citing evidence collected by local cops around allegations that the singer is holding women against their will in a house located in the county. Incidentally enough, Eves is also running for mayor of Atlanta. All these allegations stem from a BuzzFeed article written by Jim DeRogatis, alleging that Kelly is holding women against their will in a cult in houses near Chicago and Atlanta. Kelly and his attorneys have denied the allegations. Now, we've spoken, I think, briefly not only about the story, but also about Jim DeRogatis. And our buddy Head in the Jar was talking about him, and we were talking about the past of Jim DeRogatis. We'll have to flesh that out a little bit later. A detailed local investigation by the John Creek Police Department has provided key information that we believe is enough evidence that gives the Fulton County District Attorney's Office all it needs to advance a criminal investigation of the well-known allegations. Lieutenant Chris Byers of the Johns Creek Police Department, where the house is located, told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution Friday there is no new evidence in the closed investigation. Asked why the file was turned over to the DA's office, Byers said, "We gave them everything we had. We let them know what was going on due to the high-profile nature of the incident and figured they'd be getting calls about it." Later on Friday, Kelly's attorney issued a statement slamming the Fulton County Board of Commissions and Eves for his call of a criminal investigation. Mr. Kelly is outraged. Outraged, I tells you, by the ongoing efforts of the Fulton County Board of Commissions and its chairman to interfere with his business interests and now, absent any authority, attempt to have him targeted for investigation. He's pissed. He's not outraged. No R. Kelly cult investigation at this time, says Georgia County DA. And that's the strange way we wrap up your Holy Hexes headlines. Now again, everything we say and play always included in the show notes, and if you are listening live, you can get the stories at the top of the tweets. So basically what we do, Twitter lets you put moments together, and it's basically lets you put a series of tweets in order. I create a moment for each and every broadcast and tweet those out an hour before showtime, so you can see the 10 or dozen or so stories that we are going to talk about. If you're listening later, again, everything's in the show notes. And as I was saying yesterday, these are just the 10 or dozen or so stories that I pick from the hashtags. There are tons more. Some hashtags more active than others. Food World Order, Holy Hexes, both being probably my most active hashtags that we've created for the Media Monarchy Kingdom. And again, the hashtag corresponds to each day. That's just how we divvy up the news. and hopefully can talk about it in ways that make sense, I suppose, instead of trying to cram all these stories together in every single day. If you're up for it, check out #Holy Hexes and all of the other stories. All the cults, all the craziness, all the murder and mayhem, all the helter-skelter that goes on day in, day out. That's what makes it interesting to watch, of course, and see when the mainstream and the conventionals out there decide that, oh, no, now the world's going to hell because they just started to pay attention. Appropriately enough, we're going to go out with brand new music from a little band called Guided by Voices. I actually got to see Guided by Voices almost 20 years ago. I was never hugely into them, but my friends were, and they wanted to go to DC to see them. I was mostly in it because Sloan was the opener band. Brand new music from the highly prolific Ohio band Guided by Voices coming up after we look at this day in history. Always important. In some ways, I think it's hopefully some of the more important work that I've been able to do. Is just document the memes, document the repeats, document the syncs. August 17th, 1560. The Roman Catholic Church is overthrown and Protestantism is established as the national religion in Scotland. Now, why did the Protestants overthrow the Roman Catholics? I don't know, because they didn't believe that crunchy bread and Welch's grape juice becomes the body and blood of Christ. See him making sort of semi-veiled references. But like our buddy Matt of Convince Yourself Media says, hey, the bright side is Catholics listen to Media Monarchy. Continuing to look at this day in history, August 17th, 1907. 110 years ago today, we were just up there. Pike Place Market, a popular tourist destination and registered historic district in Seattle, opened on this day 110 years ago. Actually, I have a great record store in there called Holy Cow. August 17th, 1908. Phantasmagorie, the first animated cartoon, created by Emile Cole, is shown in Paris, France. August 17th, 1943, the first Quebec Conference of Winston Churchill, birthday boy Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and former Canadian Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie begins on this day. August 17th, 1962, Peter Fechter is shot and bleeds to death while trying to cross the new Berlin Wall. Now, just on some brief reading of that, I think he was actually a bricklayer working on building the Berlin Wall and tried to jump it and tried to get away. Tried to get onto the free side. Didn't happen. Getting a little more current, August 17th, 1986, Rick Allen of Def Leppard plays his first concert with the band since losing his left arm in a car accident. We did actually see Rick Allen play for Def Leppard a couple of weeks ago when we went to go see Tesla, Poison, and Def Leppard. I had to do it for the 10-year-old me. That same day, different kind of concert. August 17th, 1986, 42 people were beaten or stabbed at a Run DMC show in Long Beach, California. August 17th, 1991, they call it the Strathfield Massacre in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. Taxi driver Wade Frankham shoots 7 people and injures 6 others before turning the gun on himself. And again, they always like to try and tell you that, oh, only these crazy things happen in America. They have happened in other countries. Then they all get disarmed, and then they turn into mass stabbing events. Because you can't stop the crazy just by taking the gun away. August 17th, 1995. Another day of 2 events. Dave Gahan of Depeche Mode attempts suicide on this day by slashing his wrist at the Sunset Strip Hotel. He was hospitalized and recovered, and I don't think that was his only attempt. Depeche Mode currently on tour for their new album Spirit and their single Where's the Revolution? Goading people to cause a revolution, quote unquote. The other event on August 17th, 1995, security guards carried Courtney Love off stage after she began fighting with Hole fans because they weren't cheering loud enough during the last night of the Lollapalooza tour in Mountain View, California. Every story I've heard about that 1995 Lollapalooza was a giant mess. They still were actually doing it in West Virginia. at the Charlestown racetrack. And I believe a ton of jerks threw a bunch of mud at pavements until they said, fuck you, and quit and walked off stage. I don't think they ever held it there anymore. Continuing to look at this day in history, August 17th on this day in 1998, President Bill Clinton becomes the first sitting president to testify before the Office of Independent Counsel as the subject of a grand jury investigation, where U.S. President Bill Clinton admits in taped testimony that he had a, quote, improper physical relationship with White House intern Monica Lewinsky. Later that same day, he admits before the nation that he misled people about the relationship.
If Monica Lewinsky says that while you were in the Oval Office area you touched her breast, would she be lying?
Let me say something about all this.
All I really need for you, Mr. President,
I know,
is to
but
say I won't answer under the previous grounds or to answer the question. You see, because we only have 4 hours and your answers are extremely lengthy.
But go ahead and ask your questions.
The question is, if Monica Lewinsky says that while you were in the Oval Office area you touched her breast, would she be lying?
That is not my recollection. My recollection is that I did not have sexual relations with Ms. Lewinsky, and I'm staying on my former statement about that.
If she
my statement is that I did not have sexual relations as defined by that.
If she says that you kissed her breast, would she be lying?
I'm going to revert to my former statement.
Okay. If Monica Lewinsky says that while you were in the Oval Office area you touched her genitalia, would she be lying? That calls for a yes, no, or reverting to your former statement.
I will revert to my statement on that.
If Monica Lewinsky says that you used a cigar as a sexual aid with her in the Oval Office area, would she be lying? Yes, no, or won't answer?
I will revert to my former statement.
If Monica Lewinsky says that you had phone sex with her, would she be lying?
Well, that is, at least in general terms, I think is covered by my statement. I addressed that in my statement, and that I don't believe is...
Let me define phone sex for purposes of my question. Phone sex occurs when a party to a phone conversation masturbates while the other party is talking in a sexually explicit manner. And the question is, if Monica Lewinsky says that you had phone sex with her, would she be lying?
I think that is covered by my statement.
All right. Depends on what your definition of the word is. And that's what happened to the vaunted office of presidency here in the USSA. Continuing to look at this day in history, August 17th, 2008. American swimmer and bong hit champion Michael Phelps becomes the first person to win 8 gold medals at one Olympic game. Now posted to my own website, MediaMonarchy.com, a decade ago today. Some pretty interesting stories. And again, I think it's good to kind of look at where we were a decade ago. Look at the things that we were maybe worried about a decade ago. Look at things we maybe blew out of proportion a decade ago. And maybe look at things we undercovered a decade ago. Where's the transparency in the Security and Prosperity Partnership? That's the musical question from the Globe and Mail, who noted that on August 20th and 21st, 2007, the leaders of Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. met in Montebello, Quebec, to discuss the so-called Security and Prosperity Partnership. Now, would that be the event that cops dressed up like protesters and threw a bunch of rocks? Sure, that happened more than once. Another story posted to Media Monarchy a decade ago today: run on banks in Los Angeles amid crisis. At the same time, consumer juggernauts Home Depot and Walmart reported softer than expected earnings. $80,000 settlement in anti-Bush t-shirt case. A couple arrested at a rally after refusing to cover t-shirts that bore anti-President Bush slogans settled their lawsuit against the federal government for $80,000, the ACLU had announced. And finally, posted to MediaMonarchy.com a decade ago today, again, past its prologue as we look for the America masses to converge on Oregon. Portland to host terrorism drill Noble Resolve, August 20th through the 24th. Citizens warn of established patterns for such drills to go live. And we were quite concerned about those drills going live. It was the same time that we were looking at, now I'm not even going to remember the name, Operation Blackjack, that's it. And Noble Resolve, and all the other terror drills and things that seem to swirl around this area. Now, were those just preps? Were those just freakouts? Or were they planting seeds many, many moons ago? Celebrating birthdays today? Pretty interesting list. Some heroes and villains. Born on August 17th, Davy Crockett, Marcus Garvey, Mae West. It's also the one they claim is Deep Throat. Mark Feld, I'm the Deep Throat. Born on this day. It's also famed socialist and crazed dictator who locked up 100,000 American citizens in concentration camps, Franklin Delano Roosevelt Jr., born on this day. Oh, it's Junior. That's Junior born on this day. That's not the dad, because I looked and it said he died in 88. Okay, sorry. So earlier when I mentioned on that meeting, it's not birthday boy. It's the son's birthday boy. It's also Francis Gary Powers' birthday. He was flying a secret plane and got shot down. He died actually in 77. And it's also CIA cutout and former actor Robert De Niro's birthday today. Oracle co-founder Larry Ellison, Dexy's Midnight Runners Kevin Rowland, Eric Johnson, Belinda Carlisle, Fast Food Nation author Eric Schlosser. And interestingly enough, another strange character who's allowed to weave in and out of the world, it's Madonna's ex-husband Sean Penn. So they both basically yesterday got married on what was essentially their birthdays. It's Gilby Clarke's birthday. It's Steve Gorman, Black Crowes drummer, Rodney Mullen, skateboarder and stuntman, born on this day. Christian Laettner, Donnie Wahlberg, Kelvin Mercer from De La Soul, and the late, not great, British member of ISIS, Jihadi John, allegedly born on this day. So that's all your look at history. Past is prologue. I love doing that stuff. And I love doing this stuff for you. Hopefully you'll support our work. We are independent, non-commercial alternative media. We've been doing it for nearly 12 years, and there's about 20 years of a radio experience on the back end of that. MediaMonarchy.com/support. That's how we keep going and growing, my friends. Appreciate you being here. Hope you spread the word about the show, Monday through Friday. So we're going to wrap up with Guided by Voices, their song Just to Show You from their brand new record, How Do You Spell Heaven? And another deprogramming note for all our friends in Minneapolis. Guided by Voices is actually going to be playing with Soul Asylum and the Suicide Commandos coming up this Saturday at the Hildy Performance Center. Guided by Voices wraps up this Morning Monarchy episode. That was a Holy Hexes Day, Thursday, August 17th, 2017. I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. Again, thanking you so much for listening and reminding you, as always, my friends, like Jello Biafra, the dead Kennedy said, don't hate the media, become the media. Take care.
I've come over here today just to show you a short letter word, perhaps a crime. Is that any way to know that I adore you? A matter of words, a matter of time. And you try to criticize, be calm and don't do it now. I've come over here again just to know you, a four-letter word, to know you better. It won't be the usual disguise. I'm gonna know you just to show you, just to show you. I've done everything I can just to ignore you, a matter of fact, but now it's a crime. But you try to different sides, be calm and don't do it now. It won't be the usual disguise. I'm gonna know you just to show you, just to show you, just to show you.
You're listening to Media Monarchy with James Evan Pilato. Since 2005, Media Monarchy has covered the real news about politics, health, technology and the occult, all remixed with music and media that matters. Go to MediaMonarchy.com/support and become a monthly subscriber so you can help keep independent, non-commercial, alternative media going and growing. Thanks.